Joining me now is Nebraska Republican Congressman Don Bacon. Congressman Bacon, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Krista. It's great to be on Meet the Press.
Let me start off by asking you about the breaking news of the day. You just heard Monica and Garrett talking about this. What is your reaction to the revelations that classified documents were found at the home of former Vice President Mike Pence?
Well, we have an epidemic of senior leaders taking classified home, and we have to say categorically, whether it's Republican or Democrat, it's all wrong. And I do appreciate the fact that Mike Pence leaned into it, was fulsome right away, but it's still, we have a problem when we have a president, a vice president who's now president, and a vice president having classified in their homes. I worked with classified top secret information since 1985, and I can guarantee you I do not have any classified in our home, but it just shows carelessness, negligence, and I think Americans should be mad.
Well, your colleague, Congressman Mike Waltz, said today the system is broken. Would you go so far as to say the system is broken when it comes to handling classified material?
Not if you follow the rules. I mean, I get top secret information here. You go into a vault, everything's numbered. You can't take anything out. I have to take both my cell phones, put them in a safe, and my GPS watch, put it in a safe, and everything's tightly controlled. And even in a broader briefing, everything's numbered, and you're not allowed to take information out. So it seems to me that this classified information, at least when it's in the Senate, it would have to be very willful to get that information out. Where in an area that should not be. Now, granted, the president and vice presidents, they probably get more classified information in their offices than a senator or a congressman. But this is negligence at a minimum, or carelessness. And in some cases, it may have been staffs doing it. That's why it's got to be researched and investigated. But if you follow the rules, there should be no problem.
Congressman, I want to follow up with you. You say researched and investigated. Given that, do you think that Merrick Garland should appoint a third special counsel to look into how classified material wound up at the Indiana home of former Vice President Mike Pence?
I think Americans want fairness here. You treat one like you treat the other. That's why Joe Biden now has a special counsel, and I think we're going to have another one here for Vice President Pence.
Okay, so that's a yes. You would support a third special counsel. Okay, and just very quickly before we move on to some other policy questions, do you want to see the House Oversight Committee investigate President Biden's handling of classified material and former President Trump and now former Vice President Pence?
I think you have to be fair about it and look at each one. To pick out your political adversary and not include those in your party, it's not right. I think Americans want fair, objective responses here. This hyper-partisanship, pointing your finger at the other guy, it's not going to work here because we have 3 cases with people from different parties here, and you got to treat them the same. You got to treat them fairly.
Okay. Let's move on to one of the biggest issues facing all of Washington, the debt ceiling. We've seen battles around the debt ceiling before, Congressman, but some people are saying this time it feels different. Can you take us inside some of the conversations? How much urgency is there among Republicans to get this done, to make sure that the nation doesn't default? And do you think this time could be different? Could we be going over the cliff?
Well, we should have a sense of urgency to find a middle ground. Some folks in my party want the moon, I call it, and they're not going to get it. But at the same time, President Biden has said he refuses to negotiate. That is not right either. You know, we have a bicameral, with the House in our control, the Senate and the Democrat control. The president controls, obviously, the presidency as a Democrat. But to refuse to negotiate is not the right answer. But on our party, we can't demand a balanced budget in so many years either. That's going to take teamwork, working with the Democrats on this to get right. So I think there's some middle ground here. I've proposed trying to keep spending within inflation. We need a commission to look at mandatory spending, and those are things that I think we should be working towards.
Well, and let me just play something that Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said. I want to get your reaction on the other side.
I say to my Republican colleagues, if you want to talk about deep cuts, then you have an obligation to show the American people precisely what kind of cuts are you talking about. If you're serious about spending cuts, show us the math. Show us why you think it is worth risking a global financial crisis just to pass an extremist agenda.
So what cuts, Congressman, would you be willing to support, and can you be specific? Would you support cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security?
No, I wouldn't support cuts to the mandatory spending. That's why I suggest we have a commission, Republicans and Democrats, to work together, figure out how do you save both of these programs, because if we do nothing, they're going to go insolvent at different times. I mean, Medicare in about 4 years, Social Security about 2035. We got to work together to solve that. Can't be Republican only or Democrat only solutions. I propose keeping spending under inflation in the discretionary funding. I think most Americans would probably agree to that, and that would be a sensible way forward to get an agreement on raising the debt ceiling.
I want to ask you about a move by Speaker McCarthy, who announced members for the Rules Committee yesterday, and it does include some of the lawmakers who opposed his leadership position. What do you make of that? Does that undercut his strength as House Speaker?
You know, it may, but I really trust Chairman Tom Cole. I will tell you, you got to get Tom Cole on your show because he's one of the best senior leaders we have in our party. He's level-headed. He's comfortable with what we have. I think there's a 9-4 GOP to Democrat ratio when it comes to the Rules Committee. So it's been that way for a long time. I think there's enough there that we'll be able to function well. And if Tom Cole's comfortable, Don Bacon's comfortable.
Well, let me ask you, you say you'll be able to function well, but something that I heard talking to folks on the Hill over the weekend is, how can House Speaker McCarthy go in and negotiate a deal with President Biden on the debt ceiling, for example, given that he wouldn't necessarily be able to guarantee the support of all of these people? Does that not undercut his strength and his leverage in those negotiations?
If we get a deal like I was talking about, keeping spending under inflation or something comparable, you may lose some of the Republican votes, but you'll get the majority. And you'll get the majority of the Democrats if President Biden and the Democrat negotiators would agree to it. I think we could get 218 votes if there's a reasonable middle ground sought, but you're not going to get Republican votes when the president says he will not negotiate. And I know we're not going to get Democrat votes in the Senate or the president's support if you try to demand the moon and try to do a balanced budget or cutting mandatory spending without Democrat support. So yeah. I just think that we got to meet and do some reasonable discussions here. But we also have to have a committee or commission of Republicans and Democrats working together on shoring up Social Security and Medicare. It can't be either party demanding it. It's going to have to be a bipartisan solution to work.
Congressman, just two more. We're almost out of time, but I know you're going to want to talk about both of them. Leader Scalise said your conference would have immigration bills brought to the floor, and that would be a top priority. That has not happened yet. What's the holdup? And I know you want to see regular order for Chip Roy's bill.
Right. You know, part of the negotiations we had with the 20 and really the 6 when we were doing the speaker's votes is they wanted regular order to things come out of committee, except for they wanted selected bills of their own to not do that and to put them right on the floor. Well, as one of the leaders on the Main Street Republicans, and I'm not the chair anymore, but I started it 2 years ago, I came and said, no, every bill is going to have to go through committee, because that's how you make a bill better. You can round out the rough spots. And I think for the Chip Roy's bill or the border security bill, there needs to be some discussions on what we're doing with folks that are coming here fleeing bad governments or fleeing torture or murder, whatever it may be, that there has to be an avenue for that. You just can't shut that off.
Congressman, very quickly, this has been one of the top issues for Republicans. What's the holdup? Why haven't we seen any movement on this?
Well, it should be put in committee and treated like every other bill, and I believe the Homeland Security will take this border security bill and make it better. Yeah. That's what I want.
All right. Let me ask you finally about Ukraine. NBC News reporting that the United States has decided to send a significant number of Abrams tanks to Ukraine. Can you confirm that? What are you hearing? And what's your reaction to that announcement? Is that the right
I've only heard it through the news, but I absolutely agree. It's the right thing to do. If by sending some Abrams tanks to Ukraine, which, by the way, is the best tank in the world, and people can learn to operate it pretty quickly from the Army, the soldiers I've worked with, that's what they tell me. But this will free up Germany and other countries sending the Leopard tanks, for example, to Ukraine. And that's what they really need. They need about 300 tanks total to stave off a Russian offensive that's going to probably kick off in February or March.
Okay.
So we got to get them there soon.
And we're totally out of time, but any chance
Thank
you'll
you.
run for one of the open Senate seats in Nebraska in 2024, Congressman?
I don't think so. I think we have Senator Fisher and Senator Ricketts now, and they're both my very good friends.
Okay. Congressman Bacon, thank you so much for covering such a wide range of topics with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.